Okay, our work on the centroid told us, once we did our triangle and we found the balancing point, that point of balance is called the centroid. So I want to make sure that you actually filled in our blank here and put the centroid here. That is actually the intersection point of the medians of a triangle. And a median is a line that goes from one vertex of a triangle and meets the opposite side at its midpoint. Okay, so that's important to know. A median goes from a vertex of a triangle and meets the opposite side at 90 degrees. Sorry, not at 90 degrees, at the midpoint. We'll do the 90-degree one later when we get into some other things. Meets the opposite side at its midpoint. Okay, now we found that that spot was where the triangle balanced on the end of her pencil, and that makes it the center of mass. And as I said, that is important in terms of engineering and finding that point where everything is kind of balanced around it. And we talked about 3 dimensions. We're looking at like car designs. You don't want that center of mass to be too high up or your car will roll as it takes corners. All right, so we're going to go through the process of how to find that center of mass, that point of intersection of the medians. So I'm going to next slide, and you were to graph this triangle and determine the equation of the median from point A, vertex A, to side BC. So the median will go from point A here and meet the opposite side at its midpoint. Now graphically, you could tell that the midpoint would be right there, or you could use your midpoint formula and calculate the coordinates of that point. Our median will look like this. And if you do this with a ruler, very nicely with a ruler, you could actually come up with the equation for that line, like I've asked you right here. Now, we know for an equation of a line, we've got y equals mx plus b. We need the slope of that line, and we need its y-intercept. Now, you could use the formulas with your ordered pairs. Your midpoint would be here at -2, -1. You could calculate the slope with the point 3, 4 and that -2, -1 slope formula, or you can do rise over run. And if I look at rise over run, my rise is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and my run is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my slope is 5 over 5, which is just a plain old 1 over 1, or just 1. So my equation is going to be y equals 1x, or just x. And following that, 1 over 1 up, 1 up, 1 over, it's going to have a y-intercept at +1. So I know right away my equation for the median from A to side BC would be y equals 1x plus 1. Okay, let's look at part C here, where we're asked for the equation of the median from B to side AC. So I want to go from point B and hit the midpoint of side AC. Now again, I can look at the graph and tell that my midpoint is going to be at 2, 0, or I could use my midpoint formula and come up with the midpoint for that particular line segment, that side of the triangle. I can join them together, and then I can get my equation of the line, y equals mx plus b. If I look at my rise is 2. My run would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's negative because it's going up to the left. So it could be 2 over -7 or -2 over +7. So that's my slope part. Now as far as y-intercept goes, this one's a little tricky to find that y-intercept. So what I'm going to do with, oh darn it. Okay, let's go back to here, y equals -276. There we go. To find that y-intercept, I'm going to take one of my 2 ordered pairs. I could either use the midpoint, which is 2, 0, which lies on that line, or I could use point B, which is -5, 2. I'm going to pick one. I'm going to pick the 2, 0 just because the numbers are smaller. We're going to sub that in for the x and the y. So this is the equation of the line stuff that we reviewed at the beginning of this course, and find or solve for my y-intercept. And it is a fraction value. You can clearly see that. It's a fraction somewhere between 0 and 1. And because I can't use a ruler on the iPad here, it's hard to tell exactly where that is. It's somewhere close to the middle. And if I add 4/7 to both sides, I'm going to get my y-intercept being at 4/7, which is pretty close to the middle, which makes sense in terms of my diagram. So I know my equation for that median would be y equals -2/7 plus 4/7. Okay, now the centroid would be located right here where those intersect, which is not an easy point to read from the graph. Okay, so these don't always work out to be nice, easy points to read on a graph, so we have a bit of work ahead of us. At this point, we actually have enough information to be able to solve for that point of intersection. I could call this equation number 1 and this equation number 2, and I could reach back to what we did in our first real unit this course and solve my system. Both of these equations are solved for y. This would be easy to use substitution. It's already set up that way. I could use substitution and solve for y, and then I could sub that into equation 1 or 2 and solve for x, and that would give me my point of intersection, which looks like it should be somewhere between 0 and -1 for the x, and somewhere between 0 and +1 for the y. Okay, now because this did ask me to find this other equation for my median, the one that goes from C and reaches its midpoint across from it, I believe the midpoint looks like it's right about here, so my median should look like that. The midpoint is at -1, 3. I could calculate my slope. So D, the slope of that line, I would be rising 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and moving left 2. So my equation here would be y equals 7 over -2, but I could move the negative up to the top, x plus, and it appears as though the y-intercept happens at -1, but I'm not 100% sure because I didn't use a ruler on here. So I'm going to sub in one of my coordinates. I'll pick the c value. I could use the midpoint, could use the c value. It doesn't really matter. That's going to give me -7/2 times 1 plus 4, and plus b, and that was equal to -4. Slide over here. -4 equals -7/2 plus b. I'm going to add 7/2 to both sides, so I've got -4 plus 7/2 equals b. -4, I'm just trying to fit this in here. -4 is the same thing as -8 over 2. I'm getting a common denominator here. Plus 7 over 2 equals b. And that looks like -1/2 equals b. So it looks like my y-intercept here is -1/2. So the equation of that third median should be y equals -7/2 x minus 1/2. So there's a third equation. So I really could pick any pair, equation 1, 2, or equation 3 that I just found, and solve the system. In any case, it should end up with the same point. Okay, so determine the point of intersection that you found for the medians that you found in parts B and C. And then part F is verify that point of intersection that you found in part E lies on the line that you found in part D. So I'm actually asking you to use the two here, the B and these two equations right here, to solve the system, and then verify that it actually lies on the third line that we just found down here. Okay, so put it on pause, review how to solve systems if you need to, solve the system, and I will put a solution up on my next video.